Checking equations in two ways. In our first example here, we were asked to solve the equation 2 minus 3y equals 8. And we're not actually going to go through the solution process. What we're interested in here is how do we check the solution? So we're asked to check that the solution is negative 2. Well, there are two different ways we can do this. We can do this numerically. We can do it with variables, which is kind of in a numerical way, or we can do it with relational operators. So let's take a look at just a purely numerical approach first. In that case, what we're going to do is we're going to check the solution negative 2 into the left-hand side and check it also into the right-hand side and make sure that in this case we end up with 8 on both sides. So to check the left-hand side, we need to type in 2. We need to subtract 3 times negative 2, and I'm going to do that with parentheses since I'm substituting. I just think it's a good habit to have. And there we have it, 2 minus 3 times negative 2. We press enter, we get 8, and that definitely does check. As we did in the previous video, you also could store negative 2 in the value y and then just type in the expression 2 minus 3y and make sure that that is 8 as well. But kind of a different and somewhat more interesting approach the calculator provides us is the use of these relational operators. And you can use them numerically as well as with variables, but I'm going to show you how to do it with variables because I think it's a little bit easier to see and a little bit cleaner on the screen. So since we're using variables, the first thing we have to do is take negative 2 and store it to our variable. In this case, our variable is y. So I'm going to press alpha and 1 to get y, and I'll store that there. And then what we're going to do with these relational operators, and by the way, relational operators are things like equals, less than, greater than, etc. We're going to type in this whole equation with the equal sign. So what I'm going to do is type in 2 minus 3, and then we're going to put it in y. We press alpha and 1 for that. And then I need an equal sign. You'll see on the math key on the left hand side of the calculator that just above it in the same color as your second key is the word test, and that's the menu we want to be in. So we're going to press the second key and then the math key to get into that test menu. And here we have all of these relational operators. We want to choose number 1, the equal sign, because that's what we have. And then we're going to type 8. Now before I press enter, I want to explain to you what the calculator is going to do. The calculator is going to look at this statement as being either true or false. If it's true, that is if the two sides both have the same value, then we'll get a 1 back in response. If it's false, that is the two sides are not equal to each other, then we'll get a 0 back in response. Since we already know that negative 2 is the solution to this equation, because we've already checked it using the numerical method, we do expect that we'll get the 1 back because the statement is true. So we'll press enter, and there's our 1. That 1 again signifying, using this relational operator, that this statement is true given the fact that y is equal to negative 2, which we stored in the previous step. Alright, I'm going to clear the calculator screen out, and we'll scroll here a little bit and get example 2 up into our window a little better. In example 2, we have a rational equation, r divided by 3r minus 1 equal to 4. And we're asked to check that the solution is 4/11ths. Alright, so using the method that we just did before, and specifically using the idea of relational operators, I'm going to take 4 divided by 11, which is 4/11ths. I'm going to store that, in this case, into our variable r. So I need to press the alpha key, and I need to press the multiplication key on the right hand side, which has an r above it in the same color as the alpha key. I'm going to press enter. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. You could use a colon and try to do it in 1 step. There's the decimal equivalent that the calculator is storing for 4/11ths. Now we need to type in this expression. So we're going to start with r. So again, we'll have alpha and that multiplication key. And we're going to divide that by 3r minus 1. Now we want that subtraction to take place before the division represented by the fraction bar. So we need to put the denominator in parentheses. So we'll open up a left parenthesis, and then I'll type in 3 alpha in the multiplication key to get r minus 1. And then I'll close the parenthesis to close off that denominator. In this case, I'm checking that that is equal to 4. So I'm going to press second and the math key to go into the test menu. Choose option 1, which is the equal sign. And then I'll press 4. Alright, so we've stored 4/11ths into the variable r, and then we've typed in the equation exactly as it appears in the problem, example 2. And now we're going to hopefully get a 1 back, which would mean that this equation is true, and therefore that 4/11ths is indeed a solution. So we'll press enter, and we did get the 1 back. So 4/11ths is a solution to the equation. Alright, let's take a look at example 3 now. Example 3, we have a radical equation, the square root of 4k squared minus 3 equal to 2k plus 1. And if you go through and solve this equation, you would get a solution of -1. But we have to be careful both with rational equations and radical equations of extraneous solutions. In the previous example, we did not have an extraneous solution, it was an actual solution. But in this case, we're going to find out that -1 is an extraneous solution. That is, it is a solution to one of the intermediate steps that we got to solving this equation, but it is not a solution to the original equation itself. So our variable is k, and our solution is -1. Let's take -1 and store that to k. So I'm going to type in -1, store, and then alpha, and the left parenthesis key, which has the k above it. And I'm going to press enter. I'm going to do this in 2 steps again. Now I need to type in that equation. So I need to get the square root symbol first. You can see the square root symbol in the same color as the second key above the x squared key on the left hand side. So we need to press second and that x squared key. It automatically opens up a parenthesis for us. So now we can type in 4, and we're going to use alpha in left parenthesis to get a k. I'm going to use the x squared key on the left to shortcut to get to that second power. So we have 4k squared. I need to still put in the minus 3. Now I'll close that right parenthesis, and there's the left hand side of the equation. Need to add the equal sign, so we press second and math to take us into the test menu. Choose option 1 for the equal sign. And then finally we need to put in 2k plus 1. Now the calculator is going to go through when we press enter, evaluate both sides of the equation, and if they're true, that is if the equation's true, if both sides are equal to each other for k being -1, then we'll get a 1 back. If it's not true, then we'll get a 0 back. When I press enter here, I get a 0 back. And if you want to, you could take this a little bit further, and what you would find out is that under -1, what happens is the left hand side is equal to +1, and the right hand side of the equation is equal to -1. When we solve this equation, we square both sides of the equation. Squaring the 1 on the left still gives us 1. Squaring the -1 on the right also ends up giving us a +1. And that's where we pick up the extraneous solution at.